Welcome to National Pension Partners, where retirement planning meets peace of mind. Today, we're diving into the 412(e)(3) plan, also known as a fully insured pension plan. This isn't just any retirement plan. It's the gold standard for stability and guaranteed benefits. How does it work? Simple. It's funded exclusively by life insurance and annuity contracts. This means no market risks, no actuarial assumptions, just ironclad guarantees. Think of it like this. You're a small business owner who hates surprises. The 412(e)(3) plan gives you predictable, stable contributions every year. Your future benefits are backed by insurance contracts, so you know exactly what you're getting. No guesswork, no headaches. But there's more. These plans are designed to maximize your contributions and offer significant tax advantages. And with National Pension Partners, you're not just getting a plan, you're getting a team of experts, attorneys, CPAs, actuaries, all dedicated to making your retirement as secure as possible. We provide personalized consulting, ensuring that your plan is tailored to your specific needs. Best part, initial consultations and proposals are absolutely free. $0, zero commitment. So if you want a retirement plan that's as reliable as your morning coffee, head over to nationalpensions.com. With the 412(e)(3) plan, your future is in safe hands. Retirement planning never sounded so thrilling. Perfect for small business owners who like their finances as predictable as Monday mornings. Stable contributions, ironclad guarantees, and serious tax advantages. It's the trifecta of financial security. And with National Pension Partners, you get a team of brainiacs, attorneys, CPAs, actuaries, ensuring your retirement is as secure as Fort Knox. Oh, did we mention the free consultations? That's right. You get a personalized expert proposal with $0 down. So, if you want a retirement plan that's as reliable as your morning coffee, head over to nationalpensions.com. Because when it comes to your future, boring is the new exciting. Retirement planning never sounded so thrilling. For more details, check out National Pension Partners at nationalpensions.com. Retirement planning never sounded so thrilling.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. And today's topic will be Social Security. David said something very important at the last meeting, that they moved up the year where Social Security trust funds run out of money. And this show goes to a lot of certified financial planners and financial advisors in the United States and across the country. And so this is a very important part of retirement planning. The real important part is, should you take Social Security early? Because nobody seems to want to fix this problem. And will there really be a 20% reduction in 7 years on everybody's Social Security? Which means you better find different ways to retire. In other words, accounts that aren't linked to Social Security, because it seems to me this is not being taken seriously. So for the financial planners who are planning, usually we plan like 10 years in advance. Now we're looking at 7 years. Are we supposed to show on our illustrations that in 7 years, Social Security will be reduced or eradicated? So with that, we're going to bring in the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. But this is a very serious issue to our financial planners, David. One, a gentleman by the name of David Ramsey, who is not one of our financial advisors, but certainly is heavy in the radio area, was advocating that people should take Social Security at age 62. And he said, then put it in the stock market. And I was going, because you can earn 10%. I'm going, that may not really be true. But do financial advisors now need to put into their financial plans that your Social Security is going to be cut 20% in 7 years when they do their financial projections? Because I don't see anybody in Congress who's even stepping up to the plate to make a difference. So what is your advice to the certified financial planners in the United States?
Well, first, I think it's important to note if you look at the latest Social Security Trustees report, which was issued earlier this calendar year, it shows that Social Security is the trust fund's going to be exhausted in 2033. That's the Retirement Income Trust Fund, and that there would be a cut in benefits of 23% if nothing is done. But then you have to look at the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and you'll find out that the preliminary estimates of the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act on Social Security is that it will now be exhausted in 2032, so a few months earlier than previously projected, and that the cut would be 24%, not 23%. Now, my personal view is that Congress is not going to allow that to happen. What ended up happening the last time that we reformed Social Security is that we came within weeks of the trust fund going to zero, and the Greenspan Commission had been created, made a recommendation for a number of reforms to Social Security that provided solvency for a number of years in the future, a number of decades into the future, but did not adequately consider known demographic trends. And so now we're back where we have to do another reform commission, but this time we need to consider known demographic trends. I don't believe that Congress will allow the system to become insolvent because it's not equitable and it's not politically feasible. The people who vote with the highest frequency in the United States are seniors. And needless to say, Social Security is incredibly important to seniors. From a personal standpoint, my view on Social Security, and I practice what I preach, is if you're in good health and your genetics are such that you think that you might have a reasonably long lifespan, then I actually waited as long as I could before I took Social Security so that my benefit would be higher, and that benefit is indexed to inflation. If, on the other hand, you're not in good health, your genetics are such that say that you may not be able to live as long, then you may want to take, or if you need the money, then you may want to end up taking it early. I think Dave Ramsey's talking about a hedge strategy. Nobody can guarantee that you're going to make 10% on your money. And so there's obviously some risk associated with if you end up taking the money out and then investing into the market. I do think, however, that one of the things that needs to happen as part of Social Security reform is there needs to be more flexibility with regard to how the trust funds are invested. Right now, they're just invested solely in U.S. government securities. I think there ought to be more flexibility. And I also think that Social Security ought to be reformed where it is a base defined benefit plan and a supplemental defined contribution element for those individuals who don't end up otherwise having a defined contribution type arrangement through their employer. And we can talk about, some of the potential reform options that are out there, including the ones that the public have supported, based upon my extensive citizen education engagement efforts around the country.
Yeah, but what probability would you assign? In other words, it can't be 0% that Social Security will just drop 24% in 2032. And it's obviously not 100%. But if you're assigning a probability, and this is really hard to do, what probability would you assign to Congress doing nothing? And then in 2032, the Social Security drops down 24%.
A very low probability, 10%. I do not think Congress will fail to do something. The question is, what will Congress do, and when will Congress do it?
Right.
And I think here's the interesting thing about Social Security. We can reform Social Security and exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans. And let me tell you why. Because seniors believe they're going to get taken advantage of. They believe they're going to get cut significantly. That's not going to happen because it wouldn't be equitable and it's not politically feasible for the reasons that I said before. Young people don't think they're going to get it at all. And so therefore, to the extent that you give them, something, okay, then they're going to get more than they think they're going to get. In reality, you have an opportunity to reform the program. Hopefully, the sooner the better. So you have to make less changes and you have more transition time and people can plan better. You have an opportunity to reform the program to exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans, phase in the changes, and you can make it solvent, sustainable, secure. I think it's going to have to be handled separately from the broader fiscal restructuring that needs to take place for two reasons. One, AARP, and I used to be on their national board for the interest of full and fair disclosure, which is the 800-pound gorilla in Washington when you're dealing with Social Security. Both Democrats and Republicans are deathly afraid of them. They want it handled separately. They don't want it handled as part of the overall fiscal challenge, if you will. Rightly or wrongly, that's their position. And they're a very powerful force in Washington. And secondly, the so-called Byrd Rule, which relates to the Senate and the consideration of budget reconciliation packages. You cannot do substantive Social Security reform as part of budget reconciliation, whereas the broader set of reforms that we need to do with regard to other mandatory spending programs, discretionary spending, tax policy, they can and should be done through budget reconciliation because you can't filibuster it and it's a simple majority vote. So you have two packages of recommendations, one that makes Social Security solvent, sustainable, secure indefinitely, and the other one to get debt to GDP down to a reasonable and sustainable level, e.g. 90%, within the next 10 to 15 years. Put those before the Congress and get those enacted before we have an exhaustion of the Social Security Trust Fund and before we have a debt crisis, meaning a crisis of confidence and a failed debt auction. But I will tell you this, I'm hearing more and more people express no confidence in the Congress. I had an op-ed that was published today in the DC Journal where I draw an analogy between our current leadership in Congress for, really the 21st century has not taken on this challenge, either one that I talked about. And I draw an analogy between Wimpy and the Popeye cartoon and where we are in Washington with regard to fiscal policy. Namely, I'll gladly make the tough decisions on Tuesday if you let me do what I want to do with regard to tax cuts or spending increases or whatever today. Unfortunately, Tuesday never comes. And I'm hearing more and more people believe that we're going to have a debt crisis. And so therefore, I'm working on plan A. What do we need to do to avoid it, which is clearly got to be the priority. Plan B, what do we do if Congress fails to act and we have a failed debt auction? And what type of actions do we need to take, which I'm afraid would end up being in the face of a global depression if that happens. And then number three, if that crisis of confidence extends beyond the ability of the federal government to put its finances in order, but also to the basis of the dollar as the major reserve currency in the world, what do we need to do to think about alternatives to the dollar as far as a global reserve currency?
Yeah. Last question before I turn over to the panel. Is Congress holding hearings currently, right now, to fix Social Security? Are there hearings being held right now in Congress?
No. In fact,
I have no further questions of this witness. I'll turn it over to the panel. That is ridiculous. Any person who does actual science knows the sooner you grab a hold of this problem, the easier it is to solve. The longer you delay, the harder it is to solve. So this is really, what you just told me, that one word is really, really bad. And now I'll turn it over to the panel. We're going to bring in Sasha Starr from Canada. They don't seem to have that problem. Rick Rosner from the United States. He has to deal with that problem. And I live in Spain now. And by the way, I just found out I'm on the Spain Social Security system. I'll actually get Spanish pension and I'll get U.S. It's just really,
Congratulations, that's awesome. Yeah, every
no,
month
it
I
isn't
have to
because
decide,
it starts at age 85. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but
right,
I will get it.
every
Yeah,
month I have to decide whether to start, to pull the trigger and start getting Social Security payments. So in the previous hour, we were talking about the possibility that Russia uses a nuclear weapon and that the US responds with a nuclear weapon. In your budgeting activities for the government, did you ever look at the economics of a nuclear exchange, what it would cost each country? And
I have not done that, and I hope and pray that that will never happen because it would be insane.
okay.
Then
So
you won't have to worry about Social Security not being funded properly. So David, as I look at it, there are solutions, and I talk to people who do retirement planning every day. I've got two more meetings this evening with professionals and financial professionals about retirement planning. Anytime I talk to a young person, they always say, "Doesn't matter. It's not going to be there for me." Okay, and the old people, they just really don't care. They're looking at it's not enough for them anyway, so they just don't really care. But the thing is, what are if Congress isn't going to do anything? Should individuals take their own bull by the horns and plan for their own retirement outside of Social Security?
Well, first, let's talk about the fact that Social Security was intended to be the foundational leg of a three-legged stool for retirement income security. And like a house, you can't have a livable dwelling by just having a foundation. It was intended to be supplemented with private pension or defined contribution arrangements and personal savings and investments. Uh, people were not expected to just be able to retire on Social Security, although over 50% of current retirees rely primarily and a smaller subset exclusively on Social Security for their retirement income. So, people need to plan, save, invest, and preserve funds in excess of what they're expected to get under Social Security if they want to maintain their standard of living in retirement and if they want to have adequate resources throughout their entire lifespan. Because people are living a lot longer now than when Social Security was founded. In fact, when Social Security was founded in 1935, the average life expectancy was about the normal retirement age for Social Security, 65. And therefore, people weren't expected to live very long. But obviously, things have changed. And now the normal retirement age has been gradually moving up from some 65 to 67. And I think it's likely to be gradually moved up even further in the next Social Security reform effort. But that's not going to affect people that are retired or near retirement. It's going to affect younger people. And I come back to something you said that reinforces what I said earlier in the program. Young people don't think they're going to get it. They're wrong. They are going to get it. They may get it at a different age. They may give it in a different amount, but they are going to get it. And but the real challenge from a financial standpoint is not Social Security. The real challenge from a financial standpoint is Medicare as a subset of the broader healthcare challenge, because we've way overpromised in healthcare. Social Security, we can reform, make it solvent, sustainable, secure. Yes, there'll be changes. The younger you are, the better off you are financially, the more you're going to be affected. On the other hand, healthcare, much more fundamental problem, and many more people are going to be affected by the ultimate reforms there than otherwise would be the case for Social Security.
Okay, let's go to Canada and see what their system is. Since Sasha lives there, does Social Security kick in at age 67, or what's the story over in Canada? Is the trust funds funded properly?
Yeah, I believe so. And at least I'm not familiar with complaints that somebody was deprived of his funding under this arrangement. Now, the Medicare in Canada, as you know, there is a social net of provincially funded and run organizations that provide health care to all, not citizens, I would say, all residents of any province, whether it's, for example, in Ontario, all residents, it doesn't matter whether they're Canadian citizens or not, they're all covered by so-called OHIP. It's Ontario Health Insurance Plan. Without any exception, you may discuss the effectiveness of the medical care offered. So let's see, for MRI, sometimes you have to wait months and a half. However, if you agree to do it at 1 o'clock in the morning, you can do it same week. So it all depends on various factors, how effective it is.
What's the normal retirement age, Sasha, in Canada?
A normal retirement is 65 years old. They're talking about extending it to 67. A lot of people are working into their 70s, but again, it's a voluntary decision by certain individuals. Depends on the profession, the earning power, many other things.
So I have a non-serious suggestion to add a fourth leg to that stool. I looked it up, and 25,000 of the women selling nudie pictures on OnlyFans are older than 55. So if you're a grandma, put on a t-shirt, wet it down, and take some pictures, and maybe that'll help pay your prescription drug deductible.
Well, Rick, for the record, I've never even heard of that site, but obviously you seem to have.
OnlyFans is like the Etsy of nudie pictures, where 1.1 million people are on there selling their homemade, sexy pictures. Okay. Which is there are as many OnlyFans models roughly in America as there are cops and doctors.
Well, I learned something every day.
I have not frequented that. That's not a site that I would go to after being married to the same person for 40 years. That would be very strange if I was caught on, what do they call it, OnlyFans?
OnlyFans.
I don't think I'm going there. But I do go to the economic sites, and this does broadcast a lot of certified financial planners. They are concerned about this issue. But what was more concerning isn't them being concerned about the issue. It's what you just said, David, that Congress isn't even meeting to discuss the issue. Where in the CFP organizations and the insurance organizations, which total about 1 million people, some of the groups this will beam into will have 100,000 easy in their groups. This is a subject of very much concern. So why is it that we have millions of Americans concerned about this and Congress doesn't seem to be concerned? What hidden gem do they have, hidden solution that they have that we don't know about, that they're going to just fix this issue overnight?
Read my op-ed today in the DC Journal. We have too many wimps in Congress. I mean, we have a situation today where a significant majority of members of Congress, and there are a few exceptions. Jody Arrington from Texas, who's chairman of the House Budget Committee, is clearly one of them. Too many people in Congress today are career politicians, and their primary concern is keeping their job. They're focused on the next election rather than the next generation. They don't want to make tough choices until there's a crisis that gives them the cover to make tough choices. The last time that Social Security was reformed, it was reformed weeks before the trust fund was going to go to zero, and therefore those across-the-board cuts would happen. The current president and the nominee of the Democratic Party for president this time both said they wouldn't touch Social Security and Medicare. That's laggardship, not leadership. If you do nothing, those programs will end up experiencing significant cuts. And yet you didn't even have a journalist say, okay, well, let me see if I got this right. So you don't want to touch Social Security, which means now after the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, If you do nothing, then in 2032 there are going to be 24% cuts across the board and growing over time. So that's what you're for, right? Nobody asked that question. And sure, the president, I'm sure, would have said, no, I'm not for that. Well, then what are you for, and how are you going to get it done? And that's why I'm saying two things are necessary for us to restore fiscal sanity and for us to be able to assure the solvency, sustainability, and security of Social Security. Number one, we've got to have a constitutional amendment that will force Congress to start making tough choices on a recurring basis to be able to get debt to GDP lower and sustainable over time. And secondly, we've got to be able to have a fiscal commission that engages the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, help them understand the serious adverse consequences if we don't act, not just to Social Security, but to Medicare and elsewhere, and solicits input, sets the table for a tough vote in Congress to be able to get Social Security stabilized and to be able to get debt to GDP down. Two separate packages of recommendations. That's what my op-ed is about now. The president needs to lead on this. Congress needs to act on this because, as you mentioned, Nick, when you have a large, known, and growing problem, the sooner you deal with it, the changes you have to make, the more transition time you have, the better people can plan. The power of compounding works for you rather than against you. Whereas if you delay and kick the can down the road, the power of compounding works against you.
Right. And the thing is, in my practice, when you're dealing with somebody who's 40 years old, I've got 25 years to fund for his retirement. But when I'm dealing with somebody who's 60 years old, I've got 5 years. And so you're much more working in a crisis mode than you are when you're working with a 40-year-old. The longer horizon you have to solve these economic problems, the longer runway you have, the better off you are. But David, every year that goes by and we're talking, the runway gets shorter. And when the runway gets shorter, your options get shorter. And so what are the options that we're looking at today? Do you have any idea what would be a solution today if they'd ever get off their butts in DC and do something about that? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, let's talk about some of the things that people have talked about. Okay. One, some people want to move away from the current defined benefit system, and they want to create a defined contribution system for Social Security, whereas the money goes into individual accounts for people, and that they have a limited number of investment options to invest those funds, like the Federal Thrift Savings Plan, with the idea that they can accumulate more money over a number of years that way than what they get through Social Security. At the same point in time, there's no guaranteed benefit and there's no indexing to inflation. George W. Bush 43, tried that, and the popularity of his proposal was less after he did several national events than before, and it failed. I don't think that is a feasible option to do that. Okay. On the other hand, as I said before, I do believe that Social Security ought to be a separate and distinct legal trust fund. It's not right now. It's a separate account under the general ledger. It should be treated by a separate and distinct legal trust fund. It should have more flexibility with regard to investment options than what it has right now. I think it should be a base defined benefit system that is reformed to make it solvent, sustainable, and secure, with a supplemental individual account element similar to the Federal Thrift Savings Plan for people that don't otherwise have an employer-sponsored program, automatic savings into that, say 2 to 3%, where they can decide how to invest it. It's part of that second leg of the stool for them to be able to supplement for retirement income and get a better rate of return, hopefully, over time. The kinds of other reforms that people are talking about is taking a look at the normal retirement age. Should it be increased again gradually over 20 years or so from 67 to 69? Looking at the benefit formula to increase the replacement rate for people near the poverty level, to decrease the replacement rate for people who are upper income individuals, but not turn it into a welfare program. In addition to that, to take a look at the cost of living index and to have it be focused more on cost of living for seniors rather than the general population. their purchasing powers are very different. Furthermore, to consider a further increase in the payroll tax cap. That's what happened back the last time the system was reformed, where people that are making more than the current cap would end up having to pay the payroll taxes, but not eliminate the cap. So it's a combination of benefit restructuring and additional revenues. Those are some of the kinds of things that are being talked about, and that generally would be supported by a significant majority of the American people, and therefore should be able to get passed in Congress. But, again, you don't even have many members. There are some members that are focused on this, but you don't have many members that are really focused on this. And so we need a process to engage the American people and set the table for a guaranteed vote. That's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
I have more legs for your stool. There's a thing on your phone called Google Lens, where if you go through your house and you take pictures of all your old stuff, it'll tell you how much everything is worth. And most people, if you're in a house and a senior, you have thousands of dollars worth of old junk tucked away that you can sell. Right. Thing two is there are 23 million adult children living at home with their parents aged 18 to 34. Charge that kid some rent, or put them to work building an ADU out back. So you've got an additional income property, rental property in your backyard.
Mm-hmm. And David, why is there such a resistance to lifting the cap? They lift the cap on Medicare. So, and the thing is, I see two problems. Number one, when they lift the cap on Medicare, they lifted it unlimited, and lifting the cap on Social Security unlimited, I don't see a problem with, because my clients will admit sometimes I made a lot of money because I'm just lucky. I make $10 million a year. I just got lucky, And they go, well, if I have to pay more in Social Security taxes, so be it if they lift the cap. So what's the problem of just lifting it unlimited? Because frankly, a lot of the wealth that's been accumulated in the United States, at least on the top, not 1%, but the 1/10 of 1%, has been, I hate to say it, they're just lucky.
Well, several things, Nick. First, the tax rate for Medicare HI is a lot different than the tax rate for Social Security.
Sure.
The tax rate for Medicare HI is 1.45%. And if you're self-employed, it's 2.9% because you got to pay both, right? For Social Security, it's 6.2%. And if you're self-employed, you got to pay both sides, so it's 12.4%. That's a lot higher tax. Secondly, wealthy people don't make their money through wages. Wealthy people make their money through investments. You pay zero social insurance tax for either Social Security or Medicare for investment income, right? So, if you really wanted to go out after the wealthy people, you'd think about doing something with regard to investment income. Raising the taxable wage-based cap is something that's been done before. It's likely to be done again. I'm going to guess that it's probably going to be doubled, okay, which is basically what happened before, all right? And then the question is, well, what do you do on the benefit formula? Are you going to continue to allow people to get wealthy people to get more Social Security benefits? I don't think so. I think they're going to restructure it so they'll have to pay more, but they don't get much more. And there'll be a redistribution of the benefit structure towards people that are near the poverty level, because too many of those people are relying solely on Social Security. It was never intended to be that way, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. Wealthy people make most of their money off interest and dividends.
Correct.
Okay, it is not earned income. And every time I hear a person goes, I want a higher salary, that salary goes, no, you don't. You want more dividends, more income. So my question to you, why is it so sacrosanct that I'm able to collect lots of dividends and interest and not pay Social Security taxes? Why do people that are wealthy get away with that and not make a contribution? And I'll go back to Hungary, which I was just in Budapest a couple of weeks ago, and I discovered something new I never knew. The nobles paid no taxes by law. I fell out of my chair. I was going like, you're kidding me. The only people who paid taxes were the peasants, which goes back to when Hemsley said, she goes, well, only the poor people pay taxes. And hey, the thing is, dividends and interest, you get why are you given a pass where all these hardworking people are not? What's the story here?
Well, I think, look, my view is that we need to have comprehensive tax reform that makes it simpler, fairer, more competitive, that has more people paying something and the wealthy paying more, that dramatically reduces the number of tax preferences, to make it easier to comply with and to enforce. We've got to have a higher percentage of revenues to GDP than we have right now. Our fiscal imbalance is primarily a spending problem, but not exclusively a spending problem. Have pro-growth policies that could help, but we're not going to grow our way out of this problem. And so you're talking about the need for comprehensive tax reform, to reconsider the entire system, which I'm all for. Let me give you another example of where I would say you need to reconsider what should be subject to insurance taxes. One of the largest preferences in the Internal Revenue Code is the fact that individuals don't pay income tax or payroll tax on employer-provided and paid health care, whether it be active employees or whether it be retired former employees. They don't pay any income tax or payroll tax on that. That costs the federal government several $100 billion a year. Now, the last time I checked, healthcare was part of compensation. And so I think one of the things you have to look at is should that continue to be exempt, or should a level of healthcare coverage be exempt, and anything in excess of that healthcare coverage, like basic and essential, would be taxable. That's another way that you can raise more money for Social Security and Medicare that I think needs to be on the table.
Yeah. The other thing I discovered when I'm in Spain, in case you guys don't know, there's a wealth tax in Spain. In other words, if you have a certain amount of assets, like in Catalonia where I live, it's 500,000. It's very low. But some places like in Valencia, it's 3 million. They start taxing you. It's not much, 1% to 2% on the amount of your wealth. Why? And there's other European countries that have a wealth tax. Why is it the United States refuses to have a wealth tax when we already know that the wealthy are getting wealthier? It doesn't really matter. Social Security is not even a conversation. It's we're not going to look at that. I mean, if it comes in, fine. If it doesn't, why is it that we don't even have a basic wealth tax to get us out of this financial mess?
Well, again, I come back to what I said before. I think we need comprehensive tax reform, and I think that's something that needs to be considered. If you look at some of the research in that area, a couple of things that will come up is that possible under the current Constitution? Because it took a constitutional amendment in order to be able to tax income, and there are limits on that, right? So now you're talking about taxing wealth. We also have a number of controversies about the so-called death tax, which is the estate tax, right? Some people argue that that's inequitable because people already paid their taxes. Well, that's actually not true. They didn't necessarily pay taxes on all of that. It needs to be looked at, and that furthermore, we're not paying our way with regard to the cost of government now anyway, right? I mean, we're running $2 trillion deficits every year. So I think, look, I come back to what I said before. We need comprehensive tax reform that makes the system simpler, fairer, more competitive, gets more people to pay something, because we've got too many people that don't pay any income taxes at all. The wealthy pay more, and we dramatically reduce the number of tax preferences and consider other means of revenue raising. I mean, I think we need to do that. All right. And that's something that this commission could do.
Yep. But there is no.
What about enforcing existing tax laws on rich people? The IRS under Biden, they were going to add 87,000 IRS employees, mostly to look at tax avoidance among the rich, which costs the U.S. more than $150 billion a year. That's millionaires and billionaires avoiding taxes. And the IRS doesn't have enough people to investigate rich people. And once Trump got in, he reversed. He got rid of the 87,000 additional IRS employees. Anyway,
First, I can't get into the detail. I will tell you that the wealthy have great legal and CPA help that help them with what they're doing, and the IRS is incredibly outgunned. To the extent that they're trying to go after them. They also take advantage of every possible loophole, that exists in the tax code. The best way that you're going to deal with this issue is what I said: comprehensive tax reform that makes the system a lot simpler, and therefore people won't have a lot of ways to try to avoid taxes, and it'll be a lot easier to enforce. The IRS generates about 8-to-1 return on investment with regard to enforcement. The GAO, which I headed for about 10 years, generates 110-to-1 return on investment. So maybe the answer is we need to learn what GAO is doing to see if we can get more elements of government to do it, including the IRS.
Yeah, and I agree with you, David. Also, the thing is, a lot of the people I work with, they are very much into tax compliance. In other words, yeah, you can hire the auditors, and usually when they do settle with the service, because the service comes up with an auditor, for example, they do so more than anything just to get out of the agita. In other words, the angst that goes on. It doesn't necessarily mean that the service is correct. It just means they just don't want to continue litigating or arguing about the particular question. In some respects, I'm glad that he defunded them, because I hate to say it, I have had to deal with a lot of incredibly dumb auditors. I mean, from the service. These people are not that well educated. It's almost like they hire people off the streets and, okay, now you're an auditor. Seriously, at least that's what I've seen. And then also I get what I call rule monitors. I call them G-men. I have to deal with. I deal with them almost every week from Washington, D.C. The thing is, they try to push rules even though they don't even exist. So it's like a constant battle that you're having with your friends in Washington, D.C., and it doesn't solve anything. So I was actually happy that he didn't fund them. But
Rick,
I'm not happy with the other things. Yeah, right.
Rick, let me come back and say that I've testified in Congress several times when I was Comptroller General about the so-called tax gap, the estimated difference between how much money do we actually collect and how much do we think we should be collecting. And in many regards, in order to effectively go after the tax gap, you have to do two things. One, you've got to have a lot more reporting of information. Okay, for example, what's the cost basis of a number of investments that are made, rather than just the sales price. And then secondly, you have to have a lot more withholding. You have to get people to do a lot more withholding, than is the case right now. And Congress has hesitated, doing that. But I come back to what I said. If we can dramatically simplify our tax code, all right, we will generate more revenues, because people will be able to comply better and we'll be able to enforce it more effectively than is the case right now.
Yeah. And what also about revenue raising opportunities? One thing I'm kind of shocked at when I go to your city, Washington, D.C., I love the National Gallery. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's beautiful artwork. I mean, but here's the problem I have with the National Gallery. How much does it cost to go to the National Gallery? Right. Do you know in Europe, every place they charge you to go into a gallery like that? And see, this is just indicative of thinking in Washington. In other words, the National Gallery should charge a fee. So should all those museums. I just don't get why they just don't charge a fee for people to see it. And by the way, it's a very popular gallery internationally. You're going to collect a lot of fees from people coming overseas, but tend to me that it's indicative that Washington doesn't even think about raising revenues. Instead, all they do is slap it on the credit card and let the American public pay it. So when are they going to turn this ship around, or are they ever going to turn the ship around, or is this ship going to sink?
Well, as you know, Ronald Reagan wanted to try to keep taxes as low as possible, and he did major tax reform that provided tax relief. But he felt very differently about user fees. He felt the government ought to have a lot more user fees, whereas when you get a service, when you benefit for something, you ought to pay something for it, right? And that he had no problem with. And the government has not really pursued that option nearly to the extent that it could or should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, right.
you talk about the size of the tax code. So I looked it up. And the current tax code, if you remove past regulations, because the big book of everything includes all former tax regulations. But if you just take the current tax code, it's 2,600 pages, which is, that's like 15 medium-sized books. And if you include the official commentary and explanation of the tax code, it expands to 70,000 pages.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do you think have read those 70,000 pages?
8.
Nobody. Nobody's read all 70,000 pages. That isn't happening. But the thing is, you read the important pages that are in your area that you work in. That's for sure. But you don't read all 70,000 pages. And he's talking about just regulations, and he's talking about the tax code. He's not talking about the private letter rulings, the revenue rulings, the technical advice memorandum.
70,000 includes all the pertinent rulings.
Oh, really? Includes the TAMs and all that other stuff? Oh, yeah. My Lord. And that's one of the problems. It is definitely not a simple system. And definitely, you're right, the upper end, what they do is they do look. Right now, all my colleagues, as we're talking, are going through OBBA, looking for every tax benefit they can give their ultra high net worth individual clients and their high net worth individual clients. I mean, they scour everything in detail so that they can take advantage of whatever opportunities are out there. One, as you well know, is the opportunity zones that are out there that allow that Blake, the reason he's not on, he's very busy doing Oz work, which allows him to take somebody who has a position where they made a lot of money in a stock that was exited, and turn around and put it in Oz, and then basically over a decade eliminate all the capital gains taxes. And that got passed again. So now once again, a person who exits on because of a publicly held company, and one of my friends did an exit for 140 million, and I'm going like, dude, you can easily drop that into multiple Oz accounts and then walk away with, in 10 years, walk away with 140 million, not pay one dime in taxes.
I've got more numbers. I've got more numbers on this. Americans used to be afraid of getting audited, but with the IRS being, hobbled and broken, only one taxpayer in 200 is audited in a given year. And there were only 2,500 Americans convicted of tax crimes in a recent year, which is 1/450th of 1% of all taxpayers. So if you've got a shady CPA or lawyer who tells you, Mr. Rich Person, well, let's try this. The odds are, whatever scheme they come up with, you're going to get away with it.
Well, you also have to look at how do they determine what is an audit? Because at one point in time, I know that to the extent that the IRS communicated with you, all right, via a letter, even though they didn't physically send somebody out to be able to look at whatever else, they consider that, I think, a review or something of that nature, if you will. So, yeah.
Yeah, and see, that may not be an audit, but what Rick is saying is what they call playing the audit lottery. Now, if you look at it, David, this is a real problem. Now, years ago, when I first started law practice, they said it's unethical to discuss playing the audit lottery with your clients. Then I went to a conference actually in Montana, and some of the top attorneys said, yeah, you can discuss the audit lottery with your client. But if you look at the audit lottery, it was a 1 out of 100 chance you're going to get on. Now it's like 1 out of 200. Okay, if you went to Las Vegas and your odds of winning were 1 out of 200, no, your odds of losing were 1 out of 200, but your odds of winning were 199 out of 200, would you go play that table, David? Would you play the lottery?
Yeah, but let me come back to something that you mentioned, okay? To me, when I make decisions, there's 3 levels that I think about. The floor is legal. That is the minimum standard. You don't you shouldn't want to violate the law.
Correct.
Okay?
No defensible standard.
The floor.
Right.
Above the floor is ethics,
Right.
and above ethics is morality. We have too many people in our country that are crawling on the floor, trying to figure out whether or not it's legal or not, without considering ethics and without considering morality. I think we need more people reaching for the ceiling rather than crawling on the floor. But I hear you.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you on that. The thing is, they're looking for the minimal amount they can do to basically have a legally sustainable position, but morality and ethics are not really. It's not really part of the calculus. At least that's what I've seen. And I hate to say it on employee benefits, which I work in. But usually, with a business owner, they want the least possible to their employees and most to themselves. Now, after doing 25 years and 830 corporate plans, how many business owners have told me this, and how many have told me differently? Out of 830, 829 have said most to me, least to the employees. One said otherwise. And the person is actually in Rick's neck of the woods, who's a very famous actor, believe it or not. And she's going to benefit her employees. But I'm telling you, statistically, it's like not happening. So you go to morality and ethics. As they say in Pawn Stars, that just, at least my practice, that isn't happening. Sasha.
Well, I've heard last 15 minutes or so, you've discussed ethics and a lot of other very, very important topics. However, no one touched the question of tariffs. The tariffs is right now is number 1 by far of all economic questions. Nobody else can dispute that, and yet you're not discussing that. You cannot make any long-term plans when you don't understand whether it will be 30% tariffs or 50% tariffs or much more than that. Right now, Canada was imposed 35%. tariffs, European Union 30, the other countries about 30 or more. Now, in this environment, it will lead to complete destruction of American middle class, because middle class will have to pay for these tariffs, no one else. Imagine the Japanese or South Korean car, let's put it this way, cost say $40,000. Now with 25% tariff, forget about 35 or 50, 25. So its cost now going to be $50,000. So the American people will not touch that car. They will go to American cars dealerships. But guess what? Without competition, American dealerships will raise the prices, because if they are not, they are stupid and should not run the business, period.
Plus, so 9 to 10%.
Hold on.
Okay.
Now, the American cars will no longer be $40,000, but rather $46,000 to $48,000 car. So who is paying for tariffs? American people. Welcome to hell.
All right, so the average new car in America costs $48,000 to $49,000 now. 9 to 10% of it is made of Canadian parts. The current Canadian tariff, if Trump's thing goes through, is 35%. So you're adding 35% to 10% of a car that costs about 50 grand. You're adding $1,700 to the cost of a car to just pay for the Canadian parts of a US manufactured car.
Well, let's just say this, okay? The tariff situation, in my opinion, is a mess. And we need to get this resolved sooner rather than later. In the short term, it has not resulted in significant inflation, in part because a lot of the higher tariff amounts have not been implemented yet. They're not supposed to be implemented until August 1, in part because people end up buying a lot more inventory in anticipation that something could happen, and therefore they're working through that inventory. But over time, people will pay higher prices of differing degrees depending upon what the tariffs are and how much of the components are subject to tariffs. There's no free lunch here. The federal government might end up raising more revenue based on that. Some of the cost might end up getting absorbed by private sector suppliers and sellers, but prices will go up over time. There's no question.
David, I want to tell you something interesting. Because of this tariff situation, nobody can be certain about what announcement later in the day will be made by Trump or any other officials. So therefore, for example, I found in my personal investments a strategy of not holding overnight positions unless it's like a core of your portfolio or something that you feel like dividend stocks that you must have and so on. But other than that, for example, even stock like JP Morgan, for example, I don't hold overnight. Okay, I have position right now and I will liquidate it by 4 o'clock for sure, and many other positions. So you cannot be certain of trading simply because of the very, very uncertain situation with tariffs, really.
So that means you're day trading? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm forced now to day trade. No, it's not really a day trading because sometimes I can hold overnight position, but prefer not to, simply not to be subject to a stock falling 5-6% overnight, and there is no defense against it. So even if you sell covered call, okay, so it will soften the blow, but not much than that, not better than that.
Yeah. Well, your strategy is very different than mine. I just try to pick solid companies and stick with them.
So the company I have, and I stick to them. But if it's a core of my portfolio, there is a core portfolio that I don't trade. I just keep it. But it's mostly high-paying dividend stocks. Now, the trading portfolio, I adjust my position. I can buy stock, sell covered call against. Or I can, for example, CRM, I sold today way out of the money put, cash-covered put. It's January position, so I have a lot of time for CRM to move higher. Most likely it will. I got a little bit of premium there, but for each put, $300. Okay, we'll see how it will play out.
Well, one of the things that I've done is I've got a much larger position in precious metals than because of what all's going on.
I cashed out today on silver. It ran very, very well. I cashed out. I'll buy it again under certain circumstances. So I'm doing a little bit more active trading on trading account. My core portfolio, I don't trade for the last 5, maybe 6 years. I just don't trade it. Just collect dividends.
And we're gonna cash out on this show, but we want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, our viewers and our financial advisors in the United States. For them to look at this Social Security issue and maybe write their congressmen and their senators to get off their duff and do something about it. The sooner they get to the problem, the better chances they can find an equitable solution. Until next week, we'll see you Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.